Dubai, the city of gold, where glass towers pierce the desert sky and fortunes are made overnight. Beneath its glittering skyline, however, lies a darker reality, where wealth and power can bend truth, love, and even justice. It is here, in the shadow of unimaginable luxury, that one woman's beauty, one man's devotion, and another man's desire collided in a story that would end in blood. At the center of this tale was a driver, hardworking, loyal, and deeply in love with his young Filipina wife. Like thousands of other migrant workers, he came to Dubai with dreams of security, working long hours to provide a life of dignity for the woman he cherished. His life was simple, defined by duty, faith, and devotion. His wife, graceful and striking, carried herself with quiet confidence. To her husband, she was more than just a partner. She was his anchor in a foreign land, his comfort after grueling days of service. To him, she was everything. But to someone else, she was temptation. That someone was a man unlike any other in their world. A billionaire sheikh, one of Dubai's most powerful figures. For men like him, nothing was out of reach. Not cars, not mansions, not even another man's wife. Used to command, used to possession, he carried an aura of entitlement that few dared to challenge. Their worlds should never have crossed. The driver's wife should have remained far beyond the sheikh's gaze. But chance encounters, charm wrapped in wealth, and the sheikh's relentless pursuit would soon begin to erode the fragile balance of a marriage already strained by the city's pressures. Dubai has always been a city of extremes. For the wealthy elite, it is a playground of privilege, marble villas, private islands, fleets of luxury cars, and nights of excess hidden behind palace walls. For migrant workers, however, the city is a place of sacrifice. They build the towers, drive the cars, and serve the elite, often for modest wages and long hours. It was in this contrast of opulence and struggle that our story was born. Arman had been in Dubai for nearly a decade. Originally from a small village in South Asia, he had grown up in poverty, where survival depended on hard work and sacrifice. His father was a farmer, his mother a homemaker, and as the eldest son, Arman bore the weight of responsibility from an early age. He came to Dubai chasing the dream of stability, and though he never became rich, he found steady work as a driver for wealthy clients. Arman was disciplined, soft-spoken, and proud of his honesty. His life was modest, a rented one-bedroom flat shared with his wife, daily prayers, and remittances sent home to his family. For him, love and loyalty mattered more than money. Maria his wife, had arrived in Dubai later. A Filipina in her mid-20s, she was strikingly beautiful, with almond-shaped eyes, flowing black hair, and a quiet elegance that drew attention wherever she went. Before meeting Arman, she had worked as a receptionist in Manila, but financial hardship had driven her to look abroad for opportunity. Their marriage was not one of extravagance, but of companionship. Maria admired Arman's discipline and faithfulness, while he adored her charm and resilience. Together, they built a fragile bubble of happiness in a city where temptation was never far away. For Maria, life in Dubai was both a blessing and a curse. Stability, yes, but also loneliness when her husband worked long hours. Then there was Sheikh Khalid one of Dubai's most powerful and feared billionaires. Born into immense wealth, Khalid grew up in a palace surrounded by privilege. Unlike Arman, he had never known hardship or limits. For him, everything was attainable. Money could buy silence. Influence could erase scandal, and desire could justify any sin. Known for his extravagance, Khalid collected not only cars and properties but also women. To him, women were trophies, possessions meant to display his power. His reputation for charm made him magnetic, and his position made him nearly untouchable. Few dared to resist his advances, and even fewer dared to confront him. Fate placed these three lives on a collision course. Arman, the humble driver, began working in Sheikh Khalid's household, ferrying him to business meetings, social gatherings, and late-night outings. Sometimes, Maria would accompany her husband to events, helping him with formal dinners or waiting for him during long shifts. That was when the Sheikh first saw her. Maria's beauty was unlike the polished, artificial glamour he was used to in high society. She was natural, unpretentious, graceful, and that made her stand out even more. To Khalid, she was not just beautiful. She was forbidden. And for a man like him, the forbidden was irresistible. Arman never imagined that the very man he served with loyalty would soon covet the woman he loved most. Nor could Maria have guessed that her quiet life as a driver's wife would spiral into the heart of a dangerous seduction that would ultimately end in tragedy. The stage was set. 3 lives from 3 different worlds, loyalty, beauty, and power, were about to converge in a story written in secrets, betrayal, and blood. It began innocently, or at least it seemed so. Arman had been working for Sheikh Khalid for nearly 6 months, often driving him to banquets, weddings, and exclusive gatherings where Dubai's elite mingled. One evening, the Sheikh hosted a lavish dinner at his private villa, an event meant to impress foreign investors. The household staff was doubled, every detail polished to perfection. Maria had agreed to accompany Arman that night. She rarely joined him, but he had asked her to come since the event promised to stretch late into the night. Sitting quietly in a corner of the guest lounge, dressed modestly but elegantly in a simple navy dress, she did her best to blend into the background. Yet blending in was impossible. Sheikh Khalid entered the hall, draped in a white kandura and carrying the aura of authority that followed him everywhere. As he greeted his guests with charm and laughter, his eyes wandered across the room and paused. For a moment, his usual confidence faltered. There, among the glittering crowd, sat a woman who did not belong yet seemed to outshine everyone else. Her beauty was different from the polished socialites surrounding him. Where they were adorned with diamonds and designer gowns, she radiated a natural grace. When she smiled shyly at something Arman whispered, her face lit with warmth that made Khalid's heart stir with desire. Throughout the night, he found his eyes drifting back to her. During dinner, when Arman stepped away to handle a request, Khalid seized the opportunity. He approached her with the effortless charm of a man used to admiration. "You must be Arman's wife," he said smoothly, his deep voice carrying just enough familiarity to disarm her. Maria stood quickly, bowing her head in respect. "Yes, Sheikh, I'm Maria." "Maria," he repeated as though savoring the sound. A beautiful name for a beautiful woman. Her cheeks flushed, though she forced a polite smile. "Thank you, Sheikh." The exchange was brief, but it was enough. For Khalid, it was not merely a passing compliment. It was a spark, and sparks, when left unchecked, could ignite dangerous fires. When Arman returned, Khalid resumed his hosting duties, his smile hiding the storm brewing in his mind. But Maria felt the weight of the Sheikh's gaze on her for the rest of the evening. She told herself it was nothing, that she was imagining it. Still, when she and Arman returned home that night, she found it difficult to shake the feeling that something had shifted. For Arman, the evening was just another long day of service. For Maria, it was unsettling but harmless. For Sheikh Khalid, it was the beginning of an obsession. What had started as a fleeting glance would soon grow into temptation, and temptation, when pursued by a man who was never denied, would lead them all down a path of secrecy, betrayal, and violence. Sheikh Khalid was not a man who let desires slip away. For him, attraction was a challenge, and challenges existed only to be conquered. After that dinner, Maria became the silent flame in his mind, a woman unlike the others who paraded themselves before him. Her modesty, her quiet grace, and most of all, her status as the wife of a driver made her forbidden fruit. And for Khalid, nothing was more intoxicating than what he could not have. It began with small gestures. The next time Arman brought Maria to the villa, she found a glass of juice waiting for her, prepared on the Sheikh's request. Then came polite greetings, each one lingering just a second longer than necessary. He spoke to her as though she were his equal, not a servant's wife, making her feel seen in a world where women like her often went unnoticed. Maria tried to brush it off. She told herself he was simply being courteous. Yet she felt the heat in his gaze, the way his compliments seemed tailored for her alone. One evening, as Arman was sent to collect paperwork from the Sheikh's office, Khalid approached Maria in the lounge. "You look lonely," he said softly, lowering his voice so only she could hear. She stiffened. No, Sheikh. I'm fine. Just waiting for my husband. You deserve more than waiting, he said, his eyes locking on hers. You deserve to be admired. Maria's heart raced. No one had spoken to her like that before. Not even Arman, whose love was steady but plain. She forced herself to look away, clutching her purse tightly, praying for Arman to return. But Khalid did not stop. Over the next few weeks, he began sending small gifts. A silk scarf, a gold bracelet, perfumes that carried the scent of luxury. Maria refused them at first, horrified at the impropriety, but Khalid was relentless. He would send them through trusted staff, attaching handwritten notes that dripped with charm. Just a token for the beauty who brightens my halls. Maria felt torn. Guilt gnawed at her. She loved her husband, yet she could not deny the thrill of being desired by someone so powerful. She hid the gifts, ashamed yet secretly fascinated. One afternoon, the Sheikh took a bolder step. While Arman was away running errands, Khalid called Maria into his private study under the pretext of needing assistance. The room was quiet, the air thick with unspoken tension. "Why do you resist me?" he asked, his voice low and commanding. Maria's hands trembled. "Because I am married. Because this is wrong." "Wrong?" Khalid smiled. "What's wrong about beauty meeting power? I can give you the world, Maria. Diamonds, houses, freedom. Do you think your husband can offer you what I can?" His words sliced at her conscience. Arman gave her love and loyalty, but Khalid offered dreams she had never dared to imagine. For a moment, Maria felt the dangerous allure of stepping into a life of indulgence, of being someone more than the driver's wife. That night, she wept quietly beside her husband, her mind replaying Khalid's words. She told herself she would resist, that she would stay true. But the seed had been planted, and seeds, once sown, rarely wither. For Khalid, it was only a matter of time. And for Maria, the battle between loyalty and temptation had begun. A battle that would soon unravel everything she held dear. At first, the changes were small, subtle enough to dismiss. But Arman was not a foolish man. He had spent years navigating the moods of wealthy employers, reading body language, noticing details. At home, he soon began to sense something shifting in Maria. She grew distant, often distracted in conversation. When he asked about her day, her answers were brief, her smile thinner than before. She began dressing with more care, choosing outfits and perfumes she once reserved only for special occasions. Arman, proud of his wife's beauty, told himself not to overthink it. But in the back of his mind, doubt whispered. The first real sign came one evening when Arman returned from work earlier than expected. Maria, startled, rushed to hide something in their bedroom drawer. When he asked, she brushed it off with a nervous laugh. Later, while she showered, he peeked into the drawer. Inside lay a gold bracelet, delicate, expensive, unlike anything he could afford. His heart sank. "Where did this come from?" he asked her later that night. Maria froze. "It was a gift from a friend, a lady at church." Arman studied her face. The lie was clumsy, unconvincing, but he said nothing more. He wanted to believe her, wanted to hold onto the trust that bound their marriage. Yet the bracelet haunted him. Days turned into weeks, and Maria's behavior grew harder to ignore. She started making excuses to leave home, sometimes gone for hours without explanation. Her phone buzzed at odd times, and she guarded it more closely than before. Arman tried to confront her gently. "Maria," he said one evening, his voice heavy with worry, "are you happy with me? Have I done something to make you unhappy?" Her eyes softened with guilt. "No, Arman. You're a good man. Better than most." "Then why do I feel like you're slipping away from me?" Tears welled in her eyes, but she looked away. "You're imagining things." But Arman wasn't. Whispers began circulating among the household staff. Rumors that the Sheikh had taken an unusual interest in a woman who was not one of his usual companions. When one of Arman's fellow drivers hinted at seeing Maria near the Sheikh's villa, his stomach twisted in knots. The tension at home grew unbearable. Their dinners were filled with silence, broken only by forced words. When Arman reached for her hand, she pulled away. He lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, asking himself the question he dreaded most. Was his wife being unfaithful? One night, unable to contain his suspicion, Arman followed her after she claimed she was visiting a friend. He trailed her from a distance, his heart pounding, until he saw her enter the gates of Sheikh Khalid's residence. The sight crushed him. The betrayal was no longer a whisper in his mind. It was a living, breathing truth before his eyes. He returned home that night broken, his hands trembling, his soul burning with humiliation. The man he had served with loyalty, the man whose wealth he envied but never resented, had stolen the one thing he valued above all else. And Maria, the woman he trusted with his heart, had let him. The fragile bubble of their marriage had burst. What remained was suspicion turned to betrayal, and betrayal that would soon ignite into rage. Arman's world had already begun to collapse the moment he saw Maria walk into Sheikh Khalid's residence. Still, part of him prayed for an explanation, some impossible truth that would wash away the sting of betrayal. But deep down, he knew. His wife was no longer his alone. For days, he said nothing. He moved through his routine like a ghost, driving the sheik to his meetings, returning home in silence, lying beside Maria at night while questions thundered inside his head. He wanted to scream, to demand answers, but fear held him back. Fear of hearing the truth spoken aloud. It was only when the weight of silence became unbearable that he finally broke. One evening, Maria returned later than usual. Her hair was styled differently, her perfume stronger, her cheeks flushed as though from laughter. Arman sat waiting in the living room, his eyes dark with exhaustion. "Where were you?" he asked flatly. Maria froze in the doorway. "I told you, with a friend." Arman rose slowly from his chair, his hands trembling. "Stop lying to me, Maria. I followed you. I saw you at the sheik's house." Her face drained of color. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then her lips parted, trembling. "Arman, it's not what you think." "Not what I think?" His voice cracked, heavy with pain. "You go to another man's house, hide gifts, sneak around, and you tell me it's not what I think? Do you take me for a fool?" Tears welled in her eyes. She stepped toward him, reaching for his arm, but he pulled away. "Arman, listen to me. I never meant for this to happen." He wouldn't stop. "He's powerful, you know that." I tried to resist. "Resist?" Arman spat the word like venom. "You accepted his gifts. You let him touch you. Don't tell me about resisting." Maria's tears spilled. "You don't understand. With him I felt seen, desired. He promised things you could never give me." The words cut deeper than any knife. Arman staggered back, his chest heaving. "Things I could never give you? I gave you my life, Maria. My sweat, my loyalty, my love. And you threw it away for a man who sees you as nothing but another conquest." Her sobs filled the room, but Arman's pain had hardened into something darker. Rage, humiliation, the thought of Khalid laughing at him behind closed doors, of Maria sharing her smiles with another man, burned him alive from the inside. "Do you love him?" he asked suddenly, his voice low, trembling. Maria looked at him, her silence louder than any answer. That silence broke him. Arman slammed his fist against the wall, the sound echoing through their tiny apartment. "You've destroyed us, Maria. You've destroyed me." She collapsed onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. "I didn't want this. I swear I didn't. I was weak. I was tempted. Please, forgive me." But forgiveness was a foreign language to Arman now. All he could see was betrayal etched into the woman he once called his everything. That night, they slept in separate rooms for the first time since their marriage. Arman lay awake, staring into the darkness, the sound of Maria's muffled sobs echoing through the walls. In his mind, the confrontation replayed again and again. Her tears, her excuses, her silence when he asked if she loved another man. Something inside him had snapped. The man who once defined himself by patience and loyalty now simmered with rage. He was a driver, a servant, a nobody. But even nobodies had breaking points. and Arman had reached his. For days after the confrontation, their home became a battlefield of silence. Maria barely spoke, moving through the apartment like a ghost. Arman avoided her eyes, speaking only when necessary, his words clipped and cold. What had once been a sanctuary of love now felt like a prison of betrayal. At work, Arman drove the Sheikh in forced silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel as he imagined Maria in the man's arms. Every laugh Khalid shared with his business associates felt like mockery. Every phone call that ended with a secret smile seemed aimed at him. Arman no longer saw his employer as a man. He saw him as the thief who had taken his wife, his dignity, his very life. But it wasn't only Khalid who haunted him. It was Maria's silence, her failure to deny, her inability to swear her loyalty, her quiet acceptance of his accusations. All of it festered in his mind like poison. One night, the storm finally broke. Maria returned late, again. This time, she didn't bother to hide her perfume or the faint shimmer of expensive makeup. When she entered their flat, she found Arman waiting at the kitchen table, a single dim bulb casting shadows across his face. "Where were you?" he asked, his voice eerily calm. "Arman, please," she whispered, setting down her purse. "I can't keep lying. You know where I was." The admission pierced him like a blade. For a moment, the room spun. His chest tightened, his breath shallow. "You admit it," he said slowly, his voice trembling with rage. "You belong to him now." Tears welled in her eyes. "I never stopped loving you. But I was weak. I wanted more. I'm sorry, Arman. Sorry." The word echoed in his mind, hollow and meaningless. Sorry would not erase the images that tormented him, nor heal the humiliation that burned his soul. "You ruined everything," he whispered, his hands shaking. "You ruined me." Maria stepped forward, reaching for him. "Please, we can still fix this." But something inside him snapped. Years of sacrifice, years of silent endurance, all shattered in that single moment. Arman grabbed the kitchen knife lying on the counter. Maria gasped, stumbling back in horror. "Arman, no!" she cried, her voice breaking, but the floodgates of rage had opened. He lunged forward, the blade flashing under the dim light. The first strike tore through the air, followed by another and another. Maria's screams filled the apartment, echoing off the walls before fading into gurgled sobs. When the storm of violence ended, Maria lay crumpled on the tiled floor, her blood pooling beneath her, her once beautiful eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Arman staggered back, the knife slipping from his trembling hands. His chest heaved, sweat poured down his face, and the sound of his own heartbeat thundered in his ears. He dropped to his knees beside her, his body racked with sobs. "What have I done? Oh God, what have I done?" For a moment he thought about running. He thought about hiding the body, about pretending none of this had happened. But the reality was undeniable. The woman he loved, the woman he had sworn to protect, now lay dead at his own hands. And somewhere, Sheikh Khalid would sleep peacefully in his palace, untouched, unbothered, and untouchable. Arman sat in silence, his blood-stained hands covering his face, as the truth settled over him like a shroud. The marriage he had cherished, the love he had fought to preserve, was gone forever. And in its place there was only death. The apartment was silent except for the slow drip of blood seeping across the tiles. Arman sat slumped in the corner, staring at Maria's lifeless body. His hands were still sticky with her blood, his breathing shallow, his mind replaying the killing again and again. But silence could not last forever. The neighbors heard the muffled screams before they faded. In Dubai's tightly packed worker housing, walls were thin, and gossip traveled faster than the desert wind. Within an hour, 2 policemen were knocking on the door. When Arman didn't answer, they forced their way inside. The scene they found was brutal. Maria's body was sprawled across the floor, her blood staining the once clean tiles. Arman sat motionless, as if carved from stone, his eyes vacant. "Put your hands up," one officer shouted. Arman didn't move. Only when the second officer yanked him to his feet did he finally speak. His voice was hoarse, broken. I killed her, my wife. I killed her. The confession made their job easy. He was dragged away in handcuffs, his bloodied shirt clinging to his chest. Outside, workers gathered in hushed groups, their whispers mixing fear with curiosity. Within hours, the news spread across Dubai. A driver had murdered his wife in a jealous rage. It was the kind of scandal that caught headlines quickly, but the deeper truth, the role of Sheikh Khalid, remained hidden. At the police station, Arman was interrogated. Detectives pressed him for details, wanting to know what pushed him to such savagery. She betrayed me, he muttered, his eyes downcast. She belonged to another man. Another man? One officer prodded. Who? Arman hesitated. His lips parted to speak the Sheikh's name, but fear held him back. To accuse Khalid meant death, not by law but by power. Everyone in Dubai knew that. So instead, he swallowed his rage and whispered, Doesn't matter. She betrayed me. That's all. The investigators recorded it as a crime of passion. A poor driver, unable to control his jealousy, had killed his wife. It was a neat, simple story, one that wouldn't threaten the powerful. Meanwhile, in Khalid's villa, the Sheikh poured himself a glass of fine whiskey, untouched by the chaos. When he received the news of Maria's death, his only reaction was a cold smile. She was weak, he muttered to himself, and so was her husband. To him, Maria had been nothing more than a fleeting indulgence. Now that she was gone, he moved on without remorse. For Arman, however, there was no moving on. He was placed in a stark prison cell, awaiting trial. At night, he heard Maria's cries echoing in his mind. In the stillness, he saw her face. Not as she looked in death, but as she had on their wedding day, radiant and full of hope. The irony crushed him. He had sworn to protect her from harm, yet he had become her executioner. The investigation wrapped up quickly. The police filed it as a domestic dispute, fueled by jealousy and rage. No mention of the Sheikh. No whispers of seduction or betrayal. The truth was buried, and the official story became the only story. But truth had a way of lingering, like a ghost refusing to rest. And as Arman's trial approached, fragments of the untold story began to leak into hushed conversations. Whispers that perhaps the driver was not the only guilty man in this tragedy. The Dubai courthouse was a grand building of marble and glass, designed to reflect justice. But for those without power, it felt more like a stage where fates were sealed before the curtain even rose. Arman was brought in shackled, his face hollow, his body thinner than before. Weeks in prison had drained him. His eyes, once warm and devoted, now carried only the weight of despair. He shuffled to his seat, aware of the stares from journalists and spectators packed inside. For them, this was not just a trial, it was a spectacle. The prosecution painted the story neatly, their words sharp and rehearsed. On the night in question, the defendant, overcome with jealousy, murdered his wife in cold blood. He struck her repeatedly with a kitchen knife, showing no regard for her life. This was not an accident, not a crime of impulse, but a deliberate act of violence. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. The evidence was overwhelming. The confession, the weapon, the blood-stained clothes. To most, the case was already closed. Arman's defense attorney, a weary man appointed by the state, tried to present another angle. He spoke of betrayal, of emotional torment, of a husband pushed beyond the edge. My client was a devoted man, the lawyer argued, his voice strained. He sacrificed everything for his wife. But he was betrayed, seduced into madness by circumstances beyond his control. He is not a monster, Your Honor. He is a broken man. But the courtroom was unmoved. There was no mention of Sheikh Khalid, no whisper of the power imbalance that had lit the fuse. The defense never dared speak the name. To accuse a sheikh in court was to invite ruin, and the lawyer knew better than to risk it. Maria's family, watching from afar, wept quietly. To them, she was the victim, a daughter lost to violence. They had begged for justice, but they too knew the limits of justice in this land. When it was Arman's turn to speak, the judge asked him if he had anything to say before sentencing. He rose slowly, his chains rattling, his voice low but steady. "I loved Maria," he began, his eyes fixed on the floor. "I gave her everything I could, though I had little to give. She was my world. But she chose another man. She left me behind." He paused, his throat tightening. "That night I lost myself. I became someone I don't recognize. I cannot take back what I've done, and I will carry her blood on my hands until I die." A heavy silence hung over the room. Some saw him as a jealous murderer, others as a broken man undone by betrayal. But the court was not built for sympathy. The judge's gavel struck. "Arman Reyes, you are found guilty of murder. You are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment." Gasps filled the chamber, though the outcome surprised no one. Arman lowered his head, accepting the verdict without protest. In his heart, the punishment seemed fitting. What life could he live after killing the woman he once cherished? Yet as guards led him away, one thought haunted him. Sheikh Khalid, the man who had taken Maria's heart, who had set this tragedy in motion, walked free, his name unspoken, his reputation untouched. Justice had been served, but not truth. Outside, the media broadcasted the case as a story of jealousy and rage. A poor driver destroying his own life in a moment of madness. The public consumed it eagerly, never questioning what shadows lurked behind the polished narrative. And in his prison cell, Arman sat staring at the cold concrete walls, whispering Maria's name. For him, the trial had ended. But for the Sheikh, the game of power and secrecy went on as though nothing had happened. Life inside prison followed a rhythm. Steel doors clanging shut, guards barking orders, inmates pacing their cells like caged animals. For Arman, time lost meaning. Days bled into nights, nights into days. He counted not the weeks or months but the memories that haunted him. Maria's laughter, Maria's betrayal, Maria's last scream. The outside world quickly moved on. The news cycle that once feasted on his tragedy shifted to fresher scandals. Maria's death became just another entry in the long archive of domestic crimes. Arman, once a husband and a man with dreams, was reduced to a headline. Jealous driver butchers wife. But buried beneath that neat narrative was the truth. A truth no one dared to speak. In Dubai's glittering circles, Sheikh Khalid's life continued untainted. He hosted galas, attended business meetings, and expanded his empire. To the public, he was a model of wealth and power. No scandal touched him. No rumor dared spread. His connection to Maria vanished like smoke, erased by the careful silence of those who valued survival over truth. Yet among the staff who worked for him, whispers lingered. They remembered Maria's face, her nervous smiles, the way Khalid's eyes followed her at gatherings. They knew enough to guess the truth, but not enough nor brave enough to speak it aloud. In Dubai, secrets were currency, and some secrets were too costly to spend. In prison, Arman tried to keep himself alive through small routines. He read borrowed books. He prayed. Sometimes he spoke softly to the walls, as if Maria could still hear him. Guilt gnawed at him endlessly. Though he hated the Sheikh, he also knew the knife had been in his hands, not Khalid's. That fact chained him more heavily than the iron bars ever could. Years passed. Maria's family in the Philippines mourned her quietly, their grief buried under distance and poverty. They never received justice, only silence. But silence can be louder than truth. Arman's name faded, yet among the working-class migrants in Dubai, his story lived on as a cautionary tale. "Did you hear about the driver who killed his wife?" they would whisper. Each retelling twisted the details. Sometimes Maria was painted as a victim, sometimes as a betrayer. But always, in the shadows of their gossip, the figure of a powerful sheikh loomed unspoken, a ghostly presence erased from the official record. For Arman, there was no legacy, only regret. He died years later in his cell, alone, his body buried in an unmarked grave for foreigners whose families could not afford repatriation. His death made no headlines. But Sheikh Khalid lived on, his wealth multiplying, his sins buried beneath layers of luxury and power. To the world, he remained untouchable, a man whose charm and influence concealed the ruins left in his wake. Maria's story, stripped of its truth, became just another tragic tale consumed and forgotten. Yet somewhere, in the quiet corners of memory, her ghost lingered, a reminder of how love, power, and betrayal had collided to destroy 3 lives. And so it ended, a husband turned killer, a wife torn between love and temptation, a sheikh who walked away untouched. Justice had spoken, but truth was buried. And in Dubai's endless desert, where secrets sink like footprints into the sand, no one ever dared dig them up again.